Since I arrived in Washington, I have found it awash with people who view the Constitution as a nuisance.
So this is an article that Mike Lee wrote this year for the Federalist Society, and it involves how the people need to stand up for the Constitution and make sure that the people that they elect understand the Constitution. And I'm going to just use this Reedy app to maybe make a YouTube so that people can visualize in a different way the importance of the Constitution and why Mike Lee should be the next Supreme Court justice and not that Kavanaugh guy.
Since I arrived in Washington, I have found it awash with people who view the Constitution as a nuisance. There was an attorney general who vouched for a legislative proposal that would give the District of Columbia representation in Congress, even though experts within his own Department of Justice explained that the Constitution allows only states such representation. There was a president who bullied and badgered the Supreme Court after it issued a free speech decision with which he disagreed. And there was an outgoing Speaker of the House who, when asked about the constitutional authority for Obamacare, answered with scorn and incredulity by simply replying, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" Even in the Republican Party, far too many elected officials have been reluctant to engage the public in a meaningful constitutional discourse. President George W. Bush, for example, signed the McCain-Feingold Act even though he knew major parts of it violated Americans' right to free speech. He explained that certain provisions present serious constitutional concerns, but in a shocking abrogation of his duty to defend the Constitution, he washed his hands of responsibility by saying, "I expect that the courts will resolve these legitimate legal questions." When the Supreme Court did exactly that in Citizens United, liberals went wild, heaping on the court the criticism Bush had deflected, and that continues to this day. How to restore reverence for the Constitution. The Constitution must be defended not only by the courts but by the legislative and executive branches, as well as, especially by, the citizens who elect them. Only the voters can force our government officials to obey their oaths to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. Only the voters can force our government officials to obey their oaths to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. We can do this first by influencing the attitudes of those around us, making every effort to persuade friends and neighbors that constitutionally limited government not only matters but is essential to our prosperity as a nation. Second, we have to remind elected representatives in Washington that the power to make laws belongs to Congress, not unaccountable bureaucrats, and encourage them to enact regulatory reform measures like the REINS Act, which would help put Congress in charge of lawmaking. Finally, we have to bring our knowledge of the Constitution back to the ballot box and vote differently, especially when it comes to federal offices. What George Washington wrote in 1787 remains true today: the power under the Constitution will always be with the people. Whenever we, as a people, decide the Constitution is being executed contrary to our interest and in a manner not agreeable to our wishes, we will start to care differently, act differently, and vote differently as we seek for the limitations on power that have been promised and yet are lost. This year's tower of regulations is growing at this moment. There's no time to waste in promoting a real national discussion about the meaning of our Constitution and demanding that our elected officials respect it. Mike Lee is a U.S. Senator from Utah and author of Our Lost Constitution, the Willful Subversion of America's Founding Document. Administrative State Constitution U.S. Congress U.S. Constitution.
So anyway, that's a pretty good article, and it bears reminding of everyone we meet. So hopefully, I can make this a YouTube and make it easy to show somebody and say, "Do you know your Constitution? And if not, would you like to take a boot camp? You can learn what you need to know in 4 hours instead of 4 years at most universities."